My best friend was supposed to be my maid of honor. Instead, she stood at the altar in my place, wearing the smile I had rehearsed for 2 years, marrying the man I had loved since we were 23. The invitations had already been sent. My dress was hanging in my mother's guest room. Our honeymoon in Napa Valley was fully paid for, non-refundable, and my best friend knew all of that when she did it anyway. Her name was my best friend, and I had known her since the 7th grade. We had shared everything: dorm rooms, midnight pizzas, job rejections, heartbreaks. When I met my fiancé at a mutual friend's birthday party, she was the first person I called. She helped me pick out my engagement ring setting. She sat beside me at every bridal consultation. She was the one who told me, 3 weeks before the wedding, that she needed to tell me something important. What she told me was that she was in love with my fiancé. What she didn't tell me was that he was already in love with her back. I found that part out when my fiancé sat me down the following morning and said the words I never expected to hear from someone who had proposed to me on one knee in front of both our families. I think I made a mistake. 8 days later, my best friend and my fiancé were together publicly. 6 months after that, they were engaged. I was not invited to the wedding. My mother called it a blessing in disguise. My aunt said maybe it wasn't meant to be. My older brother, who had always liked my fiancé, went quiet whenever his name came up and changed the subject. Nobody in my family seemed to understand that I had not just lost a man. I had lost my closest friend, my future, and apparently my ability to trust anyone who claimed to love me. I moved to a different city. I took a job I was overqualified for because I needed to start over somewhere that didn't carry the weight of everything I had lost. I ate a lot of cereal for dinner. I cried in parking lots. I called my mother too late at night and sometimes just breathed into the phone without saying anything until she told me it would get better. It did get better, but not the way anyone expected. My new city was Seattle, and my new job was at a mid-sized marketing agency where I was hired as a copywriter. I knew I was capable of more. I also knew I needed somewhere to rebuild before I could reach for anything higher. My manager, a patient and quietly brilliant woman named my manager, gave me more responsibility than my title suggested. My colleague and eventual close friend, a sharp and sardonic data analyst named my colleague, made the office feel survivable. These two people, my manager and my colleague, are the reason I did not give up on myself in those first 2 years. I worked. That is the most honest way I can say it. I worked in a way I never had before, because work was the only place where what had happened to me was completely irrelevant. Nobody in that office knew about my best friend or my fiancé or the dress still hanging in my mother's guest room. I was just the copywriter with good instincts and a habit of staying late. Within 14 months, I had been promoted twice. Within 3 years, I was leading campaigns for clients whose budgets were larger than the entire agency's revenue when I had first walked in. My manager told me I had a rare combination of creative instinct and business thinking. My colleague told me I was the most terrifyingly organized person she had ever met, and that she meant that as a compliment. I started freelancing on the side. Then the freelance became its own thing. A small consultancy that I ran from my apartment on weekends, taking on brand strategy work for startups that needed someone who could think clearly and move fast. The consultancy grew. I brought my colleague on part-time, then full-time. Then we hired 2 more people, and suddenly the apartment wasn't big enough. We moved into an actual office space. Small, nothing impressive, but ours. By the time I was 31, my consultancy had 12 clients, 6 employees, and a reputation in the Pacific Northwest tech and lifestyle space that had opened doors I hadn't even known existed. I was not famous. I was not on any lists. But I was building something real, and I knew it, and that knowledge sat in my chest like a warm, steady light. My personal life was quieter. I had dated carefully, cautiously, and found someone worth being careful and cautious for. His name was my partner, and he had come into my life through a client introduction 3 years earlier. He was calm in the way that people are calm when they have actually done the interior work, not just learned to perform stillness. He knew about my best friend and my fiancé. He had asked once, early on, with genuine curiosity and no agenda, and I had told him everything. He had listened without flinching and then said, "That sounds like it was devastating. I'm glad you're still here." I think that was the moment I knew. We were not engaged yet. We had talked about it calmly, like two adults who were building something together and wanted to be intentional, and we both knew it was coming. He had mentioned, somewhat cryptically, that he was waiting for the right moment. I had told him I trusted his judgment. We were good at trusting each other's judgment. I did not think about my best friend often. That is true, and I want to be clear about it, because what happened next might make it seem like I had been waiting. I hadn't. I had moved on in the way that is real and unglamorous, not by forgetting, but by filling my life with things that mattered more. And then she called me. I almost didn't answer. Her name appeared on my phone like something from a previous life, which is exactly what it was. My colleague was sitting across from me in our small conference room, mid-sentence about a client deliverable, when I held up the phone and showed her the screen. My colleague looked at it, looked at me and said, "Do you want me to leave?" I said no. I answered. My best friend's voice was different, slower, with a careful quality that hadn't been there before. She said she was just reaching out because she had been thinking about me. She said a lot of time had passed. She said she hoped I was doing well. I said I was doing very well, thank you. She asked if I was still in Seattle. I said yes. She said she and her husband, the word landed like a flat stone, were actually living in Portland now, just a couple hours away. She laughed a little, like she expected me to find this charming. I did not find it charming. She asked if I was seeing anyone. I paused, not because I didn't know the answer, but because I wanted to feel the question before I responded to it. There was something in her tone, a brightness that was working a little too hard, that suggested she expected a certain kind of answer. Something small and solitary. Something that would make the call feel balanced somehow, like we had both paid a price. I told her I was in a serious relationship and that things were going really well. I told her my work was thriving. I gave her enough to understand that I was not who she had left behind. I did not give her details. Details were not hers to have. She congratulated me. Then she paused, and in the pause I could hear something recalibrating some version of this conversation she had planned that was no longer working. She said she was glad to hear it. She said she had often thought about how things ended between us. I said, "How things ended?" She said she knew it had been painful. I said, "You and my fiancé got together while I was still planning our wedding. That's not how things ended. That's what you did." Silence. I told her I didn't have any anger toward her. That was true. Anger had burned off years ago, replaced by something cooler and more permanent, a clear-eyed understanding of who she was and what she was capable of. I told her I wished her well, and I meant it in the way that is honest without being warm. I said I had to get back to a meeting. I hung up. My colleague looked at me. I set my phone face down on the table and said, "Okay, where were we?" My colleague stared at me for 3 full seconds and then said, "You are either the most healed person I have ever met, or you are going to process that later in a parking lot." I said probably both. What I didn't know at the time of that phone call was that things were not going well for my best friend. I didn't find out until about a month later, when a mutual acquaintance, someone from our hometown who was connected to both of us on social media, mentioned it somewhat casually in a message thread. Apparently my former fiancé's business had run into serious trouble. Financial trouble. The kind that comes with investigators and frozen accounts, and the particular social humiliation of people in a small community, realizing that what looked like success was built on a structure that didn't hold. I felt nothing triumphant when I heard this. I want to be honest about that. What I felt was closer to a tired kind of recognition, the sense that reality has a way of catching up, and that I had already moved far enough ahead that its arrival in her life was simply news, not vindication. What I did not expect was the email. It came 6 weeks after the phone call. My best friend's name in my inbox, a subject line that said only, "I need help." I read it twice. She was writing, she explained, because she didn't know who else to reach out to. Her husband's business collapse had been more severe than what was publicly known. They had lost the house. She was working, but her income wasn't covering everything. She was too embarrassed to ask her family. She knew she wrote this carefully, that she had no right to ask me for anything. But she was asking anyway. She asked if I knew of any job openings. She asked if I had any contacts who might be able to help her find something in marketing or communications, which was the field she had drifted into over the years. She said she remembered that I had done well for myself, and that she admired it even if she had never said so. I sat with that email for 2 days. My partner read it when I showed him. He didn't tell me what to do. He asked me what I wanted, and when I said I wasn't sure, he said that was okay, and that I didn't have to decide based on who I used to be or who she expected me to be. He said I could just decide based on who I actually was. I thought about who I actually was. I had built a company on the principle that people deserved honest, clear-eyed collaboration, that good work came from people who were treated with respect and given real responsibility. I had hired people who needed a chance and watched them grow into their best professional selves. I believed in accountability. I also believed more quietly, but no less firmly, that a person who has paid for their choices should not be left with nothing if there is something reasonable that can be offered. My best friend had paid for her choices. The accounting had been done by life itself, without any help from me. I wrote back. I told her I had heard about what had happened, and that I was sorry for the hardship. I told her that my consultancy had a junior communications coordinator position that was currently being sourced. I told her she could apply through the formal process, that I would not give her preferential treatment, but that I would also not hold the past against her in an evaluation. I told her the role would require professionalism, discretion, and the ability to work in an environment where her personal history with me was entirely off the table. She replied within an hour. She thanked me in a way that felt genuine and a little raw. She said she understood the terms. She applied. She interviewed with my colleague, who did not know the full history, and who evaluated her on her actual qualifications. My colleague told me afterward that the candidate was competent, a little rusty, but clearly intelligent and seemed highly motivated. My colleague recommended a trial period. I approved it. My best friend started on a Monday. She was professional. She was punctual. She did not try to talk to me about the past, not even once, which told me she understood that the offer had been about work and not reconciliation. I acknowledged her the way I acknowledged everyone, with appropriate professionalism and no additional warmth or coldness. My colleague eventually told me she was doing solid work and had fit into the team without any issues. I didn't feel generous about this. I want to be clear about that too. I felt resolved. There is a difference. Generosity implies an emotional softness toward the recipient. What I felt was more like the satisfaction of acting in accordance with my own values, without letting someone else's history rewrite them. I had not forgiven her in the way people mean when they use that word as a destination, some complete and tearful release. I had simply chosen not to let what she did determine what I was capable of doing. There is something people get wrong about moving on. They think it means the wound goes away. It doesn't. What happens, if you do the work, is that the wound becomes scar tissue. Scar tissue doesn't hurt the way fresh injury does, and it is, in fact, stronger than the skin that was there before. I carry what my best friend did. I carry the humiliation of the canceled wedding, and the months of cereal dinners, and the parking lot crying. I carry all of it. It is just not what carries me. About 3 weeks after my best friend started, my partner took me to dinner at a restaurant near the water. It was not a special occasion, or so I thought. Halfway through the meal, he set down his fork with quiet deliberateness, reached into his jacket pocket, and placed a small box on the table between us. He did not get down on one knee. He knew I found theatrical gestures a little uncomfortable. He just looked at me the way he always looked at me, clear and unhurried, and said, "I've been waiting for a moment that felt right. I think every moment with you feels right. I don't want to keep waiting." I opened the box. The ring was exactly what I would have chosen for myself, which meant he had been paying very close attention for a very long time. I said yes, not dramatically, not with tears, though my eyes were bright. Just yes, calm and certain, the way you say yes to something you've been quietly sure of for years. We sat there for a moment in the ordinary warmth of the restaurant, my new ring on my finger and his hand over mine on the table. Nobody around us knew what had just happened. It didn't need an audience. On the drive home, I thought about my best friend. Not with bitterness, just briefly, the way you glance at a landmark you've passed many times before. I thought about who I had been when she made her choice, and who I was now, and how completely different those two people were. The woman she had known was heartbroken and untested, and didn't yet know what she was made of. The woman sitting in this car, with this ring on her finger, and this company she had built, and this partner she had chosen carefully, and well, that woman had nothing to mourn. My mother cried when I called her. She said she had always known I would be okay. I told her I had not always known that, and she said she knew, and she had been scared too, but she had kept believing it on my behalf until I could believe it myself. I told her that was one of the kindest things she had ever done for me. My colleague sent me a voice memo when I texted her a photo of the ring. The voice memo was 45 seconds of screaming, and then her saying, very clearly, "I need a raise, because I have been emotionally supporting this relationship for 3 years, and I deserve compensation." I told her we would discuss it Monday. My best friend found out not from me, but the way these things travel through workplaces and social circles. She stopped by my office doorway one afternoon and waited until I looked up. She said, "Congratulations." She said she meant it. Her face was composed, but not entirely, and I understood that it cost her something to say it. I said thank you. I asked if there was anything else she needed for the account she was working on. She said no, she was fine, and she stepped back from the doorway and returned to her desk. That was the whole conversation. It was enough. My fiancé, my real fiancé, the one who knows how I take my coffee, and what I sound like when I'm pretending to be fine, and what I actually need when I'm pretending to be fine, which is almost always just quiet, and time picked me up from the office that evening. He was parked outside. I climbed into the passenger seat and put my seatbelt on, and we sat there for a moment before he pulled out. He asked how my day was. I thought about the right answer. I thought about the doorway, and my best friend's composed and costly face, and my colleague's voice memo, and my mother crying on the phone, and the ring on my finger, and all of it, the cereal dinners and the parking lots, and the 14-month climb, and the company with its 6 employees and its 12 clients, and its small but real and entirely mine office space. I said, "It was a really good day." He nodded like that was exactly what he expected to hear. He pulled out of the parking space, and we drove home, and I watched the Seattle skyline go by in the early evening light, and I thought, this is what it looks like when you build something true. Not dramatic, not a movie, just real, and yours, and worth every hard thing it took to get here.